Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to A to Z Running. And we're back for another episode of the A to Z Running podcast. I'm Andy.
And Zach.
And we're going to be talking about the treadmill.
Or the Dreadmill. And the question
Depends
is...
on your perspective.
Which is it? There is a right answer, Andy. There's a right answer.
What?
And
no,
you're going to
find
out what it is.
No.
Oh.
And if you're on a treadmill today, thank you so much for choosing us to listen to.
For your Dreadmill companion. So it's a lot of interesting information. We throw in a few anecdotes so you can hear about some of the funny, funky things that have happened to us on treadmills. And of course, it makes a difference to be able to make good choices about our training, to train with excellence. What role does a treadmill play in that equation? And we're going to get right into that in just a moment. All right, first on the docket for the world of running is Donovan Brazier opening his 2020 track season, opening his indoor season with a 600-meter run at the New Balance Indoor Grand Prix. And, of course, because he's Donovan Brazier, he ran super fast and did crazy stuff.
Fast.
It's just apparently he has no choice. He just has to do amazing things. Well, he's won this race. I can't remember now what he said. 4 years in a row now, 3 or 4 years in a row. And so his point was, I got to do it again. And so that's why he opened up and, of course, won the race. He ran 1:14 and 1:14.4 basically. And just for context then, of course that was fast, and if you know anything about the 600 meter, you definitely know that's fast. Of course, like me, I don't know anything about the 600 meter, so that only means something in the context of his world record, because he holds the world indoor record in the 600 meter, world indoor record, set last year. He ran 1:13.77 last year. He just ran 1:14.39, or essentially
at the beginning of the season, opener.
In his opening race. So 0.6 seconds off of his own world record. That's something. But not only did he do that, but in this elite indoor race, he won by almost 6 seconds.
That's huge.
That's huge, because this is a 600-meter run. That's a second per 100 ahead of the next guy. Put it in context of the marathon. If we do the math here, that's essentially winning a marathon by about 7 minutes.
Yeah.
That's substantial. So that's not bad. And by the way, missing his world record by 0.6 in a 600 meter would be essentially like missing the world record in the marathon by 42 seconds. So that's still pretty tight.
Yeah.
Not quite like Bekele missing it by 2 seconds, but it's something.
Yeah. And he is kind of getting some attention because as he came across the finish line, he like shrugged.
Like, no big deal.
No big deal. And he was trying, I kind of love this about Donovan. I actually really love this about Donovan is how he really is a humble guy, because in his interviews, he's talking about, they're trying to say like, oh yeah, you're the favorite for the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. And he's like, well, really, there can be no one that has that title yet.
Yeah.
He says something like that, but I'm like, wow, look how fast you are.
Yeah, it's serious business. So, of course, you've already noticed we're excited to follow this season for Donovan, especially. Who knows what's going to happen come Tokyo. That's a long ways away, but he's off to a great start, and so there's some excitement there, and let's just hope that the momentum builds.
Yeah. And I'm sorry to do the want after such an awesome piece of news, but I do need to bring to you sad news too. The Diamond League did cut some events for this year. And for those of you who don't know what the Diamond League is, it's high-level international racing. In fact, if you don't know that term, you should head over to AtoZrunning/dictionary, because we have a lot of terms if you're not caught up on your lingo, your running lingo.
That's AtoZrunning.com/dictionary for your complete running dictionary by A to Z Running. And if you like what you see there, we've got a downloadable for free, beautiful, fancy PDF version as well.
Yes. So the Diamond League events that were cut, the 200-meter run, the steeplechase, discus, and triple jump.
All right, so I'm going to give an opinion that Andy is not going to enjoy here.
Oh, no.
And say, I don't really care that they cut events from the Diamond League. And here's why, because they always do this. They're always changing the roster of Diamond League events. And even though they cut them from the Diamond category, there's still going to be they're still going to run some of those events at Diamond League races. Here's the thing. Diamond League is the premier international like circuit, if you will, for track, and it's wonderful. It's a great thing. But it's not bound to like, they don't have to offer a complete track meet every single time. And the reality is they do this all the time. They're always shifting around how they're focusing on things, what they're doing, when they're doing things. And I think that's totally okay. There's no reason to think that that's a bad thing.
Except it's not good for those individual events. So I am going to link. Emma Coburn is not super happy about this change.
Yeah, sure.
And so she's not going to be running any Diamond League events at all, period.
Well, boo-hoo.
But I can see why. Like, oh, you don't think my event is important? Then I'm not going to run any other events either.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, just going back to the point of what are they trying to accomplish here? They're trying to represent certain dynamics and certain opportunities, and they just can't. They can't provide something for everyone. So if the argument is, oh, you're cutting my event, so I'm going to boycott you, well, what about the athletes out there who have never had a Diamond League event represented, ever? Like, race walkers, for instance. Does that mean that all race walkers hate the Diamond League? That's just not the right perspective in my mind.
All right, fair. The next one, though, I think we can both agree is pretty sad.
This is really something. I think we're seeing some kind of new dynamics arise in the sport here with this dynamic. So I'm going to set it up. We mentioned Russia and the 4-year ban that Russia as a nation has received so that no athlete can compete to represent Russia internationally at all within that 4-year window. And potentially it could be extended beyond that if they don't return to compliance with the World Anti-Doping Agency. So that brings us to this situation.
There is a lawsuit that is against the All Russia Athletics Federation because there are some loss of incomes for athletes who are Russian.
Yeah, think about it. So if I am an internationally successful athlete representing Russia, I cannot essentially make all of those potential appearance fees, all those potential bonuses and winnings and such, especially through my country, because most countries do that, especially Russia has. I'm all of that is lost for the next 4 years. And in track and field, 4 years is oftentimes a career.
Yeah, it can be.
And so the example here then is Lisitskin. I have no idea if I said that right, but she's a known entity in track and field if there ever were some in the high jump. And she's been wildly successful. What is it, Andy?
3-time world champion in the high jump.
3-time world champion. So really, yeah, she has cause for concern here. And who's at fault in all of this? We've talked about Russia's problems. Certainly there are Russian athletes who are at fault with some things, failed drug tests, other things. But the problem here is that Russia was not willing to comply with the World Anti-Doping Agency's stipulations so that they could move back into qualification to compete. They weren't willing to. And
but Maria was. Maria was willing
right.
to.
So many of the athletes were clean. Many of the athletes were in compliance, but because the country wouldn't do it, they can't compete.
Yeah. And what she said kind of wraps it all up and makes it very clear. Their actions have been detrimental and are resulting in deprivations in moral, reputational, and financial aspects. According to my preliminary estimations, it should be a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in case I completely miss this winter season.
Yeah, definitely cause. I support the effort here because it speaks to a bigger picture, which is that these agencies, they exist for the athletes. They should be putting the athletes first. And so, they need to be acting in a way that's supporting the potential success of their athletes, and Russia's organization wasn't.
Yeah.
So there's certainly more, as always, but let's go ahead and take the time now to move on to our main topic.
Let's get going with our main topic. Love it or hate it, we're talking about the treadmill. In fact, you might be on a treadmill as we speak.
Listening to AtoZrunning, which makes sense because if you're running, what better thing to listen to?
So the conditions here in Michigan, if you follow us at all, I hope that I'm not too whiny about it, but it's been icy. It's been bad out. And I don't mind like snow and cold, but when it comes to ice, I don't mess with it. I mean, Zach was skating down the driveway the other day. I fell going down our driveway. Pretty much our driveway is a very unsafe place to be.
Yeah, and really what it comes down to is if the conditions jeopardize a quality run and you have an option to get a quality run in without having to risk that, why risk that?
Yeah, it is really hard though. I relate with a lot of you who have said, like, I don't want to go on the treadmill. I'll try to go through 2 feet of snow at all costs. But I agree with that, except for the ice part. One fall can ruin a season. It can cause major injury. So that is a good time to get on a treadmill.
Yeah, so we'll talk about when to and when not to, and certainly some of our lessons learned from treadmill experiences, good and ugly, literally ugly in Andy's part, physically distorted features
that is not
because
nice.
of treadmill accidents.
I'm
Story
feeling
upcoming.
pretty sensitive about that right now. I don't know
You're
why.
feeling sensitive about
Yeah.
that? That's probably because your face was mangled hideously.
Oh, no. So another reason that I've been on the treadmill, we're going to talk about a few reasons that might put you on the treadmill. Sick kids. It is so hard to get in a quality workout when you have sick kids.
Yeah, and just in general, when your kids are not allowing for your normal schedule, right? You can't go to the place like YMCA that has the child care. You can't, and so when you have an option, a flexible option like that, it's kind of just a piece in the puzzle that really makes the training thing work out.
Yeah, and another reason is for safety concerns. And I have actually had to do this a few times. I've had to run on the treadmill because an area that I traveled to wasn't really safe for me to run alone.
Yeah, and even like, so it could be safe if you could get to somewhere else.
Right.
But not from the hotel kind of thing. And so there's certainly scenarios like that. And personally, I would much rather run a 2-hour long run on a treadmill than pay $20 for an Uber to go to, but Andy and I tend to disagree on some of those things where it's probably worth $20 for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I actually recently did that. I took an Uber to go do a long run at a park. Another reason might be for injury sake. There might be some kinds of terrain that aggravate certain injuries that you might have. And the treadmill is often known as a softer surface. So if you're having some issues with pounding on the roads, the treadmill might be a good option for you.
Yeah, when it comes to health and especially the state of injury and those kinds of things, sometimes a treadmill's an asset and sometimes it's a liability depending on what's going on. And it's important to understand that too, because I think so often we choose the option that just is like the default switch. I'm going to run outside because I prefer to run outside all the time. But really, we should have a little bit more intentionality behind that. Like if I have hip flexor problems, some strained hip flexor issues and such, treadmills will probably aggravate that more than running outside because the pulling forward motion is exaggerated on a treadmill and the push-off motion is reduced just in terms of your muscle groups and how they're firing. So if I have calf problems or calf issues, the treadmill is actually not a bad way to go to kind of alleviate that a bit because I'm actually using my calves less when I run on a treadmill than when I run outside. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the opposite is true for hip flexors.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that. Another reason that you might want to utilize a treadmill is for videoing your form because you're in that set space and you can get a longer period of time where you're able to see when you get a little bit more tired, what does it look like? When you're fresh, what does it look like? And kind of see the progression of it. So videoing your form, that's an occasional thing. I realize that's not an everyday thing, but it could be valuable if you're looking to try to improve your form a little bit.
Yeah, I would say then 2 simple points of caution with that. Because a treadmill is not a fully realistic or a fully realized version of your running form. When you're running on flat, stable surfaces, it's not quite the same as when you're running on a treadmill. The 2 reasons that are most commonly why. The first is because you're not actually running with air resistance and you're not propelling yourself forward literally, you're actually standing in a slightly different posture on a treadmill almost always. It's almost impossible to not do this. And so when you're running outside, you tend to have a little bit more of a hip tilt forward, a little bit more of a forward lean, but on a treadmill, you're gonna actually stand up a little bit straighter and almost lean back a little bit more because you're not trying to stabilize yourself in terms of air resistance and gravity in the same way. And then the other side of that is, for the same reason, your foot strike is almost always going to be more pronounced toward the back of your foot, toward your heel when you're on a treadmill.
I've noticed that for myself.
Yeah, some people use incline to try to alleviate that some, and it actually is a good idea. 1 or 2% incline helps your foot strike in a little bit more natural way, but that doesn't mean that your heel isn't still accelerating toward the ground more prominently. So like if you're trying to watch a gait analysis of a regular treadmill running, it's not going to be perfectly accurate in terms of what your actual gait would be running outside.
Yeah, but it can still be helpful for little tips here and there. So running on a treadmill isn't 100% advisable, which some of you are clapping for that because you're like, you don't like being on the treadmill.
She means advisable 100% of the time.
Exactly.
You shouldn't run on a treadmill all day, every day.
Exactly. You can get injured by the lack of variety. It just does not create every scenario for you. And overuse injuries often come by that same repetition. And running, it's 100% repetition. So the more variety you can get in terrain and variety that you can get in even turning, like you can't turn on a treadmill, at least not yet. There's probably some stuff coming technology-wise.
I'm sure there's something out there that but yeah, you're not going to do that.
You're not using your stabilizers as much, so you're not going to be as strong. So when you do actually go to race, your stabilizers won't be quite ready for what lies before you on a real outdoor course.
Yeah, and there's a simple example from our common knowledge in the running world, which is if you run a marathon on a completely flat course with very few turns, your recovery time is almost always greater than if you run a marathon on gently rolling hills or even just like occasionally rolling hills with some consistent gradual turns. You know, you don't want tons of 90-degree turns, but compare the two, and if you run on that totally flat course, the damage, if you will, to your muscles is greater because the variety isn't there. It's not dispersing the effort more across different muscle groups. Instead, it's just leveraging the same ones over and over. And the same thing happens if you try to train on a treadmill all the time. Or, for example, if you try to train on a track all the time, especially if you're running the same direction on curves, which is a common problem we see in college athletes because they're running the same direction on a track over and over for all these fast workouts. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, so switching directions on a track. A lot of you guys know that, but that is a good thing to practice. So speaking of practice, we're going to talk about best practices for being on a treadmill. And this is one that Zach's really good at it. I forget. It's having a fan.
How do you forget that?
I don't know.
Dying of heat exhaustion, wondering how could I possibly not be so hot right now? Maybe that fan 4 feet away from me, if I turn it on, I'll feel better.
I know. It's ridiculous.
Might
but
I also mention the fan
help.
built into the treadmill in front of you?
I do use that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. The other thing along the same lines is dressing wisely for being on the treadmill. And I know at the gym, sometimes we're doing mobility and drills and things, but wearing long tights on the treadmill, it's warm. It's really warm.
Yeah, just thinking about like skin temperature and such, you oftentimes are going to be more uncomfortable. And on a treadmill especially, it seems like the more uncomfortable you get, the harder it is to want to continue running. There's a motivation
I think that's
piece
all
there.
The time, like whether you're indoor or outdoor.
But when you're on a treadmill, you always have the option at any moment in time you can stop.
That's true.
You don't have to get somewhere to stop. You don't have to stop at a certain place at a certain time. You can stop at any moment on a treadmill. So you want to do the most you can.
So don't. If you guys are running right now, don't stop. Keep going. I'm encouraging you to stay on.
You can't stop. You won't stop. But that's the whole point there is try to set yourself up for success. Give yourself the most amount of comfort possible without, obviously you still need to get in a good quality run, but the most amount of comfort possible so that it's the easiest to stay on that treadmill.
Another one, this is where my story comes in, is using the safety strap. I think a lot of us think we're too cool to use a safety strap, but we're not too cool to use a safety strap.
I think safety straps are lame.
Hey, no.
No, actually, I'm kidding. But however, I actually do disagree with this on a principle point. So I'm doing this before Andy tells her story for a reason, because otherwise she's probably just going to totally convince you in just a moment. But I do not use the safety straps. And the reason being is the number of times I have hit the thing with my hand and stopped, and I've run into the front of the treadmill because you're running, and when you hit the safety strap, it doesn't ease the belt. That design is it stops it as quickly as possible when you hit the safety button, not when you hit the stop button, but the safety button. And
Stop crossing your arms over. You got to just have better form, Zach. Better form.
I'm running and I hit that thing and immediately the belt stops and I launch into the front of the treadmill and it hurts. And okay, that's happened. However, Andy's is worse.
I was running in 6th grade, I think, at some local gym. It was my first time on a treadmill, and I cranked it up to 6-minute mile, which was my PR at the time, like I don't.
So you're just thinking in sixes. I'm in 6th grade. I got to run a 6-minute mile.
I guess. I don't know. But I love to run fast. I've always loved to run fast. And I was just chugging along. I'm in front of my friends, you guys. And I totally biffed it. And I slid like it kept going. And it got the front of my face all the way up. So there's like this big scab on my face for a really long time.
6th grade class pictures just look awesome.
I didn't
She's
get
got
any.
this scar up the
No.
front. Looks like Scar from Lion King, quite literally.
He's exaggerating. I actually wish that we had a picture of that to put in the link to this blog. I don't know if I do.
Talk about book burning. Why did your mom not keep all of those
I
photos?
don't know. Because she's too nice.
Well, so clearly, it's if you do or if you don't, you're at risk for something. I think obviously the safety strap is built in there for a reason, so it probably makes sense to use it. But you run risks whatever you do. So try to design for yourself the greatest chance of a successful experience there. That's kind of the mentality.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, the thing that I mentioned is that, and I'm actually serious about it, with your form, not crossing your arms in front of you as you're pumping your arms. In fact, you might want to be careful about pumping your arms. You still want to do it because it's proper form, but that exaggerated motion and the swinging in front of you is a bad idea when you have a safety strap on.
Well, one of the things, I think we've just touched on it a couple of times here, but one of the things that just makes a difference with all of this is on a treadmill, it tends to be easier to not think about things like form and posture and such. Many of us feel kind of like miserable when we're running on a treadmill, and that misery reflects on our posture. But also, when we're running outside, we feel like, fast or rhythmic or something. Our rhythm is thrown off on a treadmill. Our sense of ourself as a runner is different on a treadmill. And so the consequence tends to be is our posturing changes. It's negative. We're not thinking about it as much. And that's where things like that arm swing thing, if you're starting to collapse a bit and your chest collapse forward, your arm swing is going to naturally begin to cross your body more. And so if you stand up straighter, then it'll bring your arms, especially if you bring your shoulders back, it'll bring your arms more to a neutral position along your sides rather than crossing in front of you. So yeah, certain things that you are able to control to give yourself the best chance of a positive treadmill run experience.
Knowing your equipment is also important. I don't know about you, but I've had a few times where I've gotten on one of those treadmills at the gym that has a set period of time. And I don't realize it because I I just push start and I start going, and an hour later it will just shut down on me and I'm in the middle of a workout or something. And so it's good to know before you get on the treadmill if it does have a set time or if you need to increase that before you begin.
So what do you do when you're on the treadmill? How do you make it interesting?
That's the next part.
Don't stare at a brick wall.
I've done that. It's hard. It's hard sometimes. You want to be engaged in the run, and you don't want to be too distracted so that you lose focus of your form. But there are things you can do, and some things that we recommend. Hey, you might want to listen to a podcast.
Yeah, I don't know about any good podcasts out there. It's a struggling market. There's not much content, but if you can find something to listen to.
He is totally joking. It's highly saturated. We're really grateful that you've chosen us to listen to. Changing the incline, which is advisable anyway, can help the run go by a lot better. So it kind of keeps you from slapping that treadmill over and over to change the incline up and down.
Yeah, and up and down. So try to kind of move it around and be intentional about it so that you're not running at the same. If I'm trying to run uphill for 4 miles straight, keep in mind that it's very unlikely you'll ever run uphill for 4 miles straight. So it's probably not good for your body in general. But if you move it up for a bit and then down for a bit, there are some treadmills, and certainly some of the newer ones, it's pretty common, that will run kind of like a simulated route that will automatically change your incline and decline throughout the run. Those things are wonderful. And personally, I find that to be one of the best ways to do a treadmill run. However, you should probably pay attention to how high the incline gets, because some of those pretend to be these mountain runs, and they'll give you 6, 7, 8% incline frequently or for long periods of time, and that's probably not ideal either.
Unless you're training for a mountain run.
Well, yeah, sure. There could be reasons why you'd want that. But if you're trying to do just an easy run, remember that anything above a 2% incline is going to begin to kind of exponentially increase the level of effort it takes to keep running. Because remember, your speed doesn't change when your incline changes unless you change your speed. So that's another thing to think about. If I'm going to put the incline up a decent amount, I should reduce the speed.
Something I like to do personally, this is definitely more of a preference. I like to be in a location by a window if it's possible. And what's great about the downtown, Grand Rapids YMCA is it's like mostly windows. But personally, that's really good for me. There's something about it that kind of opens me up, opens my shoulders. I have the feeling of being in a bigger space, and that helps me with my form.
That's actually that's a research topic, Andy. That's why many workout facilities have kind of an open space for these kinds of things.
And if you can't, do try to keep your eyes up still, even if it's not a space that like makes you motivated to be looking up. It's still important to keep looking up.
So that brings up actually one of the things that I like to do while I'm on a treadmill is I like to read books. I don't like to watch movies. I'm not sure exactly why, but I don't really like to watch media. And so that's not good. So I like to actually read a book a lot of the time too. And the problem being, I tend to have my eyes focused downward. And of course, as we know from talking with Dave Hodgkinson previously on the podcast, as well as comments we've made on some of these kinds of things, if I look down, my form is likely to be collapsing over time. Even if it doesn't immediately, it will gradually, unless I'm really trying hard to avoid that. So reading a book on a treadmill, is it okay? Well, I just have to be careful with that, and I have to be mindful of my posture again.
Workouts with varying speeds, you can even do an easy run, and just if you change it between like a couple of the numbers and you just kind of vary it between them, it might help you stay in it and focused and kind of give you something to do. So, this one I'm going to be at 8. And this next mile, I'm going to be at 7. As long as there's not like a big difference in your heart rate, it can kind of change it up for you.
So the principle there is give yourself short-term goals or short-term endpoints.
Yes, that's a better way to put it.
Yep. So if I feel like, for every 5 minutes that I'm on the treadmill, I'm going to turn the incline up to 4% for 30 seconds and then back down. That by itself creates a sense of immediate goal that I can get through and get past quickly. And that will help get through the longer experience. So the same thing then with varying speeds, of course.
So that brings us to avoiding certain things when on the treadmill. And
like running on the treadmill?
Oh, no. We did talk about looking down at a screen. I cannot watch shows if I'm looking down at all. I have come to find that I can't maintain my proper form, that I just kind of hunch in to the screen that I'm looking at it if it's sitting on the treadmill display.
Yeah,
now, if it's up above me, I can do it. But if it's like on my treadmill display, I cannot.
Yeah, so here's the thing, and I mentioned I like to read when I'm on the treadmill. Certain treadmills I can't, and certain ones I do because of the position of the display console that I set I don't read books, I read ebooks when I'm doing this so that I can have just a single screen in front of me instead of pages falling over. But anyway, that positioning of that display console matters a ton, the angle and the height. So our treadmill at home, our deck is super high. It's like an incline treadmill, so it goes up to like 40% incline. Is it 40? It is 40%.
It is 40%.
I'm not even exaggerating.
Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It's almost straight up. It's
so
crazy.
At 40% incline, you have to crawl on your hands and knees. So it goes up. The whole thing is just high. The mount is high. The console is high. So when I set my iPad up there to read an ebook, it's actually quite high. It's almost parallel with my eyes looking straight forward. So it's not a problem. At the YMCA that we like to go to the most, there's a couple of treadmills that have higher consoles and a couple that have very low consoles, depending on which one you're on. Those low ones would be horrible. It's just bad. So I always look for the ones that have higher, they tend to be the ones that have like those bigger screens. Those usually have a better option.
One mistake that I make all the time, and Zach's going to be horrified when he hears this, I'll run an entire run at 0%. And I won't change my incline. And it is total vanity. I'm admitting this because we talk about wanting to be authentic here. I run faster when it's at 0%. And I just like that feeling of like, because I do watch my heart rate too. I like the feeling of having like low heart rate.
Well, Andy, I have something to say about that. But since we're going to get into it in a moment, I'll just hold it off and say the equipment that you're using might actually make a difference there for the better. So you don't have to run at 0% to feel like you're running faster.
Ah, I like the sound of that.
Suspense, anticipation, coming soon. Wait 2 minutes and then we'll get to that.
Not stretching or doing proper drills. Zach's like always doing his proper drills and stretching before running. But me, I'm like in a hurry. I go to the basement, I do a couple things, and then I hop on the treadmill. I don't do the same kind of drills that I do if I am outdoor running.
Yeah, that makes very little sense.
I know.
Clearly, you still need to. Well, so here's the thing. Most of the time, in situations where a treadmill is necessary, like I need to run on a treadmill for a particular reason, a lot of times it's influenced by other factors that, like, I'm in a hurry or I'm distracted by other things, whatever else is going on. The point here is, if this is my run for the day, if this is my workout for the day, I need to do it well and I need to do it right. We talk about training with excellence. I need to run on a treadmill with excellence. I can't just think, okay, I'm just on a treadmill today, I'll just jump on and go. That makes very little sense. It puts my health in jeopardy. It doesn't meet my training needs for the particular effort. So really, I just need to continue that excellence that I take to any of my training and continue that with my treadmill experience.
And part of training with excellence is also knowing the purpose of your run. So if you do go indoors and it's an easy day, the temptation for some of us is to run too hard and too fast because we just want to get the miles in and get off the treadmill.
Yeah, just get it over with. Yeah, I've been there so many times. I cannot tell you. This actually, I'll give you the simple example. Very nearly every winter, when I come back from my winter break, because I've been taking a month or two off in the winters for a few years now and just riding on a bike instead. And then I come back to running kind of mid to late winter. So every year that I've done that now for the last almost 4 years now, I have Achilles pains. And it's not always my Achilles specifically, but the tendons around my ankle. I have problems and pains with that. And I can tell you I know exactly why. Because in the winter I run more on the treadmill, and while I'm running on the treadmill, I'm trying to come back too aggressively because I want to just get through the treadmill run, so I'm rushing it. I'm putting the pace up too high. It's artificial. I shouldn't be actually running that fast. And I'm also using that incline, which, again, I'm coming off of not running much and a lot of times biking, which if you're biking a lot, your ankles are kind of immobilized, and so they're tighter and less flexible a lot of the time. So then I start throwing these treadmill inclines in there too for long periods of time. It's just a bad recipe for a negative experience. And so it's been problematic for me. And all of it comes down to, if I would just run on the treadmill like I normally run other runs and not try to just get through that and try to work out harder, it would be much more positive.
Yeah, and I should mention something too. If you're feeling like running on a treadmill is harder than running outside, there are a couple reasons for that. One is that a lot of treadmills, if they're not, no maintenance has been done to them, they can be inaccurate. In fact, I had a friend who told me that she was doing a workout on a treadmill and it just seemed really hard, way harder than it had been. And she was using this piece of equipment for a few runs, and finally they took a wheel to it to measure as they were running. I don't know how that exactly looked. That'd be a funny thing to watch, but it ended up being the wrong distance. It was long for the full mile repeat that they were doing. So don't be discouraged. Take whatever the day brings. Today on the treadmill, if you're running right now on the treadmill, what today brings, is it going to make tomorrow better? Yeah, you're putting in the work. If it's going to be a little slower, it's okay. Let it go.
Yeah, so really, when it comes down to the equipment, almost every treadmill, I don't know that there is a treadmill out there that's actually accurate. On principle, the physics of it make it nearly impossible to be perfectly accurate because they're measuring belt speed, that wheel, and that's determining what it thinks your pace is. However, every time your foot collides with the belt, it slows the belt down. And so then the question is it actually accommodating that slow and speed up that's happening every time you strike the belt? And who knows, but the reality is every time we measure them in every possible way, treadmills are not consistently accurate. They're not perfectly accurate, and they're not consistent with each other in any stretch of the imagination. So here's the point I was about to make earlier. Andy, you were mentioning the effort, and you feel like I want to run at 0% because it looks like I'm running faster and it's easier and all that kind of stuff. So here's the fact as it boils down to it. If I am running on a treadmill and I have the option of using a different piece of equipment to measure my run, I should probably do that because I know treadmills aren't consistently accurate. So if you've got a foot pod, use your foot pod, set your watch to treadmill running mode, use a foot pod, and that's going to be better. If your watch has treadmill running mode and it has an accelerometer and all those things in it, it's likely still going to be a better option than the treadmill itself. I know those things, depending on which watch and which brand, they're not all great, but probably still a better option. Also, here's the principle of the thing. When you adjust things like the incline and some of that, it's going to influence your pace as well. And this is another thing the treadmill does not account for. So when I'm at 0% incline, And this is exactly how it works with our treadmill at home. When I'm at 0% incline on our treadmill, running at 8.6 miles per hour, that should be 7-minute mile pace. However, on my watch, when I'm using a Stride foot pod, my speed measures at closer to about 704, 705 mile pace at 0% incline. When I move it up to 1% incline, it's right at about 7-minute pace. When I move it up to 2% incline, it's about 655 pace. And all of this boils down to the differences in those kinds of things actually influence how fast my legs are moving. They influence my cadence. They influence, all of those things are a part of the puzzle. So there's a happy medium in there somewhere, and it probably has the most to do with moving it around, not running one run at one setting the whole time.
Very good advice, Zach. I will take that into account and stop being so vain.
Was that vanity?
Well, for me, it was just like, I just like seeing the faster numbers. And I do think too, and I'm going to put this out there, when you're at the gym, sometimes it can be hard not to run too fast because you want to appear strong because there's other people around. And that's also not a good reason to change your schedule and run faster for a run if you're supposed to be going easy.
Yeah, we've had this conversation with many of you about Strava as well. What I want to be perceived a certain way because of all the stuff I'm posting on Strava. So sometimes I run a little harder than I should on my easy days so that it looks like, so it looks good, right? And the reality is all of these things are at war with the most fundamental thing that I'm trying to accomplish, which is I'm running for a reason, for my own purposes, not for all of those other people around me or those people on Strava. While those things can be positive influences to help motivate me and keep me engaged in what I'm doing, they're at war with my fundamental goal potentially in any given moment in time. And so what do I want to do here? Do I want to sacrifice my training for the appeal of, by the way, the people that probably aren't paying much attention to me, if at all? Because remember, we all have this limelight complex where we think everyone around us is watching us. In reality, most people are not paying any attention to us because they're thinking you're watching them. But the point being, what's the most important thing there? And I try to aspire toward that. I'm not saying that I personally do that well because I'm a sucker for the crowd that I think is paying attention to me and never is. But what's the goal? And what am I doing to ensure that I'm working toward that goal with as much excellence as possible?
And this is something I want to say to encourage everyone who has been needing to get on the treadmill for any of the various reasons that we mentioned. I truly believe that if it's hard, if mentally it's difficult to stay engaged, you are coming out stronger on the other end. You're training your brain to be able to function and run at it under any circumstance. And maybe that is the weightiness you might feel when you're on the treadmill. It doesn't feel as freeing. It is really great because you have to stay engaged, and sometimes it's great that you even have to stay apace. You have to keep your legs moving. You have your cadence going, and that allows for you to gain some momentum in your outdoor running too.
Definitely. So I think my final reflection on the conversation of treadmills is just understanding that you can get a high quality treadmill for $2,000 to $3,000, like a really good thing machine that's going to last you a long time for $2,000 to $3,000. And why I'm saying that is because in my mind, as a runner who wants to engage with my training long term, like I want to do this thing, I want to do it well for a long period of time, having my own treadmill is probably the single most positive influence in terms of expenses that I can do to benefit my training long term. And here's my argument essentially for this. It's worth taking the time and money to save up for that $2,000 to $3,000 treadmill because what that does is that gives me the greatest degree of flexibility within how I can train, when I can train, where I can train, and all of those things than any other single purchase. Certainly, the gym membership thing is a key dynamic, but in reality, that's not still quite as good of an option because if I can't get out of my house, I still have my treadmill. If I can't get to the gym or if there's other circumstances going on, I've still got my treadmill and the option is always there. That's huge.
All this to say, keep up the great training, whether you're inside, whether you're outside, whether you have to go to the gym. All of it is putting in the good work towards your goals. Thanks so much for joining us on another episode of A to Z Running Podcast. Of course, we'd love to hear from you. So connect with us at A to Z Running on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
And you heard me mention it earlier at the beginning of the episode, but we've got this new A to Z running, this complete running dictionary. And I say complete, I just like to say that, but really it's a living thing. We're going to just keep adding to it.
In fact, we had someone mention a couple things they wanted added, and we're going to add them.
We're going to add them because you know what? That's the whole point of having a running dictionary, is that it's a running dictionary. Look what I just did there. That was so good. That happened by accident. All right. So here's the thing. Go to AtoZrunning.com/dictionary from this point, now, and forevermore, and you'll be able to find the latest update of all the great things that you should know about running and track and cross country and all these interesting things with their terms and concepts and such. And we're going to try to define them in a way that makes sense. By the way, if you visit the page, you'll find right up at the top, not only can you see on the page the dictionary that's right there, but you can download for free a very fancy PDF version with nice colors. And it's got categories.
Did a good job on it. It is pretty fancy.
Okay, I might be a little biased because I designed it myself. But anyway, you can find that. That's free. And as we make updates to the dictionary, we'll post the newest version of that downloadable too. So, maybe just keep going back and keep downloading it. We love it.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us again, and stay safe whether you're inside on the treadmill or you're outside running.